I'm John Tecce of BGB Motorsports, and Grand-Am was kind enough to ask us to take some of you guys through a step-by-step process of what's involved in building a GS car for Continental Tire Sports Car Challenge. And what most of the teams have to do, they can't start with a purpose-built car or what you would call body in white that has no interior, is we have to go to your dealer's showroom floor or around town, or you patrol crash sites and you look for street cars so that you could take a fantastic interior, rip it out, throw it on the floor, and sell it to a guy in Oklahoma for 10 cents on the dollar. When you're done removing all the unnecessary interior components, carpets, plastic trim pieces, we box them up. You can see here I have a perfectly good pair of Porsche seats that we're going to sell to somebody on the internet. Everything else in terms of carpet and plastic trim will get boxed up and shipped out. As you can see over there on a pallet, we have things like door panels, trunk panels, interior carpeting, cup holders, interior door trim pieces. For the most part, about 70% of the interior gets thrown away, used, sold, or just kind of recycled. Once you've gone and removed every piece of interior that any happy American would gladly have in their Porsche, and you rip it out of the car and throw it on the floor, you're left with the bare essentials that you're required or that you should be using to build a Continental Tire race car, and in this case, a Porsche Cayman. After we take the car to the cage builder and have the cage installed, we'll bring it back after we paint the interior of the car and put all of the stuff back inside. For example, you have your typical dash cluster here, which you see in every road-going Porsche. But since the Porsche is a very fickle car to build into a race car, it won't even run without this part. So this part actually is mandatory that it goes back in the car, and everything else gets built on top of it. Window glass all has to go back in. We're not allowed to replace any glass with Lexan, so we have to use the factory glass. In your typical car, this would be a navigation system, this would be a climate control, and this would just be some auxiliary buttons. We're going to put this all back in and make our own faceplate, which will have driver controls for a cooler for the gearbox, maybe a driver fan, you know, and some other driver controls. But we try and, at least on a topical basis, we like to maintain the look of the car and try and not over-engineer it and keep it somewhat looking street stock, but at the same time it does end up looking more like a race car. But you'll see that the Porsche, you know, and probably the Subaru among the paddock look the closest to anything that you buy from the dealer. When we get to the cage builder, you'll see the car and you'll see that it's missing fenders and bumper covers. When we go to the cage builder with it, when we have time, we strip it as far as we can take it. The mirrors will go back on, the headlights will go back on, the bumper covers will all go back on, the fenders will go back on, the deck lid will go back on, the rear deck lid will go back on. Just some typical maintenance going on here. In between races, we'll drop the transmissions and inspect the clutch kits, but essentially you're watching what is the biggest difference between a Cayman and a 911, and that is that the gearbox sits behind the engine in a mid-engine Cayman, whereas in a 911 the gearbox sits in front of the engine.